to consolidate the place of the judiciary in our constitutional and democratic dispensation, my administration will respect judicial decisions while we cement the place of Kenya as a country anchored on democracy and the rule of law.
That was exactly 3 years ago, and that is the focus of our next conversation, is the state of governance and the rule of law in this country over the last 3 years since the president made that statement at his inauguration speech on the 13th of September 2022. What day of the week was it, Sam?
It was
Tuesday.
Isn't it?
Yeah.
Tuesday. I think
it was a Tuesday.
I knew you'd know, so yeah.
I was there.
Yes, that's why.
And
I know, yes, and I know actually, yeah, I remember the story you did. As a matter of fact, that soundbite was in your story that you filed on that day. I even remember what you said in your piece to camera as you wrapped up the story.
Oh, wow.
So you are the best place to start.
Thanks for watching.
Yeah. I'm a big fan. So let's talk about what it has been like. He came, you know, coming in on this chariot of fire, so to speak, with the judiciary. Remember, there'd been all of those questions. I mean, if you recall, there was complaints even from the Chief Justice at the time, David Maraga, about the separation of powers, about the intimidation of him individually, and of course the judiciary as well. There was the pending matter of the 6 judges who hadn't been sworn in for whatever reason. You remember President Uhuru Kenyatta had expressed reservations, never made those reservations public, didn't share them with the JSC, or at least if he did, that wasn't made public. And so in he comes with this promise that mine is about respect for the rule of law, respect for the judiciary, respect for the separation of powers between the 3 arms of government, particularly between the executive and the judiciary, that had not enjoyed a very, let's say, cordial relationship.
Right.
Yeah.
So very big on the promise, and you understand the reason why he was doing that. And again, like we were talking about in the earlier conversation, he knows how to build alliances. So this was another opportunity for him to build alliances with a very important arm of the government. And let's listen to what he said on the same day of inauguration. Then we can continue.
Judiciary's articulation of the aspirations and standards enshrined in the Constitution has deepened our democracy and institutionalized our rule of law. Our judiciary is now, without a doubt, Kenya's biggest constitutional dividend. Our judiciary has demonstrated transparency in its proceedings and decision-making, thereby consolidating its independence, authority, and legitimacy.
Right. So you recall that after the vote, after the decision of the commission, or should I say Wafula Chebukati, on 15th of August 2022, there was a petition filed by the Azimio team. And you recall that day, President Uhuru Kenyatta was very furious with the decision that was made by the courts, saying that it cannot be that the process is important in one election, but it's no longer important in another election. And you recall that press statement that he gave. Obviously, he was an interested party because you'd have wanted the Azimio candidate Raila Odinga to win. But hey, look at where we are today. So in that address, again, expressing how important the judiciary was at the time, and obviously talking about the hostile relationship President Kenyatta had with specifically David Maraga, the Chief Justice, to an extent that he had come out to complain and saying that he's no longer going to be attending state events because of the mistreatment that was coming from the executive to the judiciary. So this was a new president trying to court the judiciary to express to them that I am different. I respect the separation of powers. I respect the judiciary. And indeed, like you're saying, went ahead to swear in the 6 new judges, promised an extended judiciary fund to implement it as the Constitution would desire. And as that was happening, he was also allowing the judiciary to even have more resources to employ new judges of the High Court, new judges of the Court of Appeal. But that wasn't for long, because Finance Bill 2023 came, and shortly after there was a fallout. A matter was taken to court, and there were serious decisions that were made by the court. The bench was led by the late Justice David Majanja, to the extent that affordable housing levy, or the housing levy, was deemed to be unconstitutional because it lacked the framework of implementation. And as soon as that decision came out, the president spoke somewhere in a funeral in January 2024. Let's watch what he said.
We are a democracy. We will protect the independence of the judiciary. What we will not allow is judicial tyranny and judicial impunity. That we will not allow. That will not happen. Haiwezekani ya kwamba wakati tunaheshimu uhuru wa mahakama, watu wachache, watu ambayo ni beneficiaries, kama wale beneficiaries ambao wamekuwa wakiiba pesa yetu pale NHIF, 50% ya pesa ya NHIF zinafujwa na mahospitali chache, wakora chache, fake hospitals, fake doctors, wanafuja pesa ya NHIF. Alafu watu wachache ambao wamekuwa wakiiba hiyo pesa wameenda wakatafutana na corrupt judicial officials, wakapanga njama ati wazuie ndio waendelee kuiba pesa ya NHIF, nusu ya pesa ya NHIF. I want to tell you, my friends, hiyo haiwezi kuendelea.
So many things were happening at the time. So apart from the finance bill, you recall there were the 4 laws to implement the universal health coverage that had come in. And the courts had decided that these laws are actually unconstitutional for various reasons. And there had been a judgment that they were unconstitutional. But then he was complaining that the judges, instead of looking at the merits of the case, are being influenced by corrupt people. So that appeared to turn frosty. You recall there was a famous meeting between the Chief Justice, the President of the Republic, and in attendance were the 2 speakers of the 2 houses of Parliament, a meeting that was really criticized by many pundits, including, I think, the Law Society of Kenya, asking why would the 2 institutions be sitting down to, what exactly are they discussing? So you clearly find a president that had fallen out with what he had thought he believed in. But that has not been the only thing, because when you hear him calling out the judiciary for corruption, it didn't stop there. Along the way, the same has been extended to other institutions, be it Parliament, which now is being accused of being full of extortionists on how they deal with matters there. So drifting, changing, but where is the separation of roles? Where is the separation of powers? Because elected to lead the executive, yes, you have enough authority to do that, but there are checks and balances that can only be pursued by the judiciary. If they are corrupt, it's not a meeting with the Chief Justice that will resolve corruption. It is a complaint before the Judicial Service Commission that is going to ultimately yield results that can actually have the force of law. But what have we seen? A totally different picture.
Yeah. And Yvonne, I think when Gituku talks about the totally different picture, what does this say when the president blatantly, almost today, anapuza amri ya mahakama? I know we're going to go back into some of the things he had said at the time, but then does this mean that what a judiciary does, it being one of the 3 arms of government, does not matter? Because early in the week on Monday, the courts, through I think Justice Bahati Namuye, barred the National Treasury and the Public Procurement Regulatory Authority from implementing the mandatory use of the electronic procurement system, halting another government move. I want us to listen to the President speaking today about e-procurement, saying itaendelea despite what the courts have said.
Procurement of public services, we lose up to 40% of public money through procurement. And that is the reason why we have said we are going to go e-procurement, so that everybody inajulikana. Hakuna haja ya giza. Kama wewe unatuuzia mali kama serikali, shida iko wapi kama wananchi wamejua umetuuzia kwa shilingi ngapi? Why does it have to be in the dark? Ndio mnaona hii kelele yote mpaka wengine wameenda kotini kublock because they want to continue hapa kwa giza. Hii giza lazima tuondoe. Let the public know how much is government procuring public services for Kenyans. For the avoidance of doubt, let me say we are not going back on e-procurement.
And, you know, Yvonne, this is not the first time that Mahakama has ruled against government directives. And various reasons are given. Taratibu hazikufuatwa za kisheria. There was no public participation. As I said, proper process was not followed. So why not follow process when trying to implement whatever it is implementing, so that even if someone goes to court, there are no grounds for it to be thrown out, like e-procurement. And then now the president comes and says, we'll continue with it. Of course, it's noble, the fact that you want to control jinsi ambavyo procurement is done. You want to say, oh, watu waache ku-overcharge serikali for services, which is fine. But why didn't you follow proper process when you're doing it before? So that mtu akienda mahakamani haisimamishwi. And that has not happened once, twice, or 3 times. So you wonder who's advising government in terms of when they're trying to implement these things. And get to talk about how everyone else has been blamed. The judiciary has been blamed. And Parliament has been recently blamed for being kuhusika na corruption. A lot of very strong words were used. We listened to the president talking about it. Now, this is the same parliament that has been bosom buddies with the government from the beginning. Remember, we had all these independently elected members of parliament trooping to the government in the beginning, I think within the first week or 2 of the government being sworn in. And then broad-based happened. And then you had parliament being accused of just kupitisha vitu ambavyo serikali inataka, up to even SHA. Remember, we even had instances of members of parliament asking themselves, tulipitisha hii kitu aje? Considering the fact that ni wao walipigia kura wakapitisha. And then when questions arise, they're asking themselves, hold up, what did we pitisha? So that same parliament, which was besties with the government, has found itself in bad books. Let's listen to the president talking about the corrupt parliament.
There are people who are destroying the credibility of parliament. And they are collecting money in the name of parliament. The latest, Sokohuru in the Senate. Where does somebody find 150 million? Where? Eh? Is that his money? That is money that belongs to the county. Is that correct or not correct? Yes. Let me ask you, members of parliament who are seated here. Do you, for example, know, do you, for example, know that a few members of your committee collected 10 million shillings so that you could pass that law on anti-money laundering? Did you get the money? So we are not going to shame them. We are going to arrest them.
We are waiting to see those arrests. I know the governor Bomet na former governor wa Bungoma ambao wameharakishwa, wamefikishwa mahakamani over corruption. We're waiting to see. Remember we talked about how kuna bodies zitatupwa chini ya basi between now and 2027 because that was your bunge. That's what I'm saying. We talked about how there'll be bodies under the bus zinakuja. That was the second time the president accused parliament of corruption. The first time he spoke about it was at the Devolution conference in Homa Bay. Let's listen to the president on the same.
There is something going on in our legislature that we must call out. There is money being demanded from the executive, from governors, from ministers, from people in the executive, especially those who go for accountability before our houses of parliament. It cannot continue to be business as usual. It is not possible that committees of parliament demand to be bribed, demand to be paid for them to write reports or to look the other way for what is happening in either the national government or the county government.
You know, these accusations and corruption brings up the whole question about how public money is being spent. We keep saying we don't have money, we have to keep borrowing. We looked at, Gituku was showing us when he did data point about how much we're borrowing, how it's gone up by 3 trillion in the past 3 years. We talk about how we are borrowing more domestically than we were for foreign. But then how are we spending what we have? We've seen reports by the Controller of Budget talking about how spending is, how there's no accountability, how we're overspending on things like travel and all those things. And I remember what President William Ruto said after the Gen Z protests, how they'll cut down on expenses. We did not see that happening. We talk about corruption, but we also need to look at how we are spending the money that we have vis-a-vis the issues that the country faces. And the whole thing about priorities and what we're doing as a country is what causes all this malumbano, what people are talking about. So when you see the little that we supposedly have being spent, not being spent the way it's supposed to be spent, it angers people, it causes frustration, and it raises a question about what exactly this government is about. If there is little that we have, but we are not spending the little that we have the way we should evolve.
There was something you said earlier about how many of his decisions are being challenged by the court, and how, you know, this is, you mentioned some of the issues, lack of public participation, unconstitutional, the manner in which it was done. I just wanted to illustrate that a little bit. The anti-corruption task force that was put together by the president, 4 petitioners went and challenged the legality. Remember, it had 11 members, the EACC, the ODPP, and they talked about whether that task force would be usurping the roles of constitutionally mandated bodies. That's not all. In April, the courts also declared unconstitutional the Police Reforms Task Force, which was headed by former Chief Justice David Maraga. This is even after, it was after they'd given a report, right, and their recommendations. Then there was another task force that the president had put together on human resources for health. Challenged again in court. Before they even started, I think. Before they even started, they say they failed to meet the legal requirements. There was no public participation. Besides that, they also raised again another issue that has come up, which is overlap with the Kenya Health Human Resource Advisory Council that already exists. That's not all. The Shakahola Commission of Inquiry, Justice Mugambi, ruled that it is intruding into the judiciary's mandate by forming this committee to investigate something that is already under the judiciary's purview, that is already before the judiciary as well. Then there was the National Climate Change Council, to which the president nominated 4 persons. That again challenged in court, procedurally flawed. And finally, we all remember this, after the Gen Z protests last year, the task force to audit public debt, again challenged in court. Why? They said this role is already being carried out by the Office of the Auditor General. 6, possibly 7 decisions that have been challenged by the president. And it shows his style of governance, right? He chooses to govern and rule through task forces and committees, you know, special inquiries and that type of thing, to which the courts have said, no, not going there. And you can imagine, for a man who promised judicial independence, then, you know, finds his issues challenged by the courts, very different stance. And you'd understand now why he's a man who's not happy with the courts, when he was hailing the very independence and constitutional dividend that the courts would provide under, you know, our current state of administration. So that's him and the courts and the rule of law. Jay?
Well, I think it's typical William Ruto, what we had indicated initially, that he wants results by any means necessary, even if it means going beyond what the law expects him to do. And that is why I want to believe, historically, he must be the president that in his first term in office has had a number of task force or plans that he's had challenged in court, and successfully so. It tells you that where is the place of consultation in his government? Because some of these things are basic things. And it tells you, and one thing that I really must say is that where there's separation of power, then good governance is assured. And that is why the judiciary keeps on doing this as a measure of separation of power. But in its place, the judiciary is meddling in his running of affairs of this nation. So on the score of that alone, we can't really say that William Ruto has been very aligned to the Constitution and good governance. He's been off the rail on that, because right from 2024, after the Gen Z protest and the first task force he put in place on public debt that was thrown away, I think he should have taken a step back and asked the why, so that he's able to do that. But this is not something that is very far-fetched from what the president does. If you look at some of the things that he's been saying out here, yesterday or the other day, he was in Ethiopia, and he brought out the issues of Kenyans willingly raising money. And I think we have a bite for that, Ruto in Ethiopia, where he's basically saying that we've raised $4 billion willingly as a people. And Robert, if we could have that bite play where the president was in Ethiopia during the launch of the dam.
We are already constructing 170,000 houses as I talk to you. And Kenyans, from their own resources, without debt, without support from others, have raised $4 billion worth of projects under the housing program.
And if we had upheld good governance and transparency, these are figures that ordinarily every Kenyan would have been aware of. But when you ask the people who are charged and tasked with having those figures, they tell you we are far from what the president was saying.
Mr. Makweli ndio huyu. Sam sat with him. Just a very quick one. Sam, the numbers you heard on Tuesday here were different. Just chip into this one.
If you use the rate of 130 shillings to the dollar, 4 billion gives you 520 billion shillings. But according to the Chief Executive Office of the Affordable Housing Board, up until June 2025, the board had collected about 100 billion shillings.
Wow, okay.
From the year of 2023, they have collected about 34 billion shillings. So if you have to put it together up to June, you're talking about 134 billion shillings.
But 5 times?
Yeah.
I mean, you know, a variance of a few billions here and there.
Yeah.
How can it be that the president says the figure is 5 times more than what the actual CEO chair? Unless he meant the figure for something else, because, you know, if it had been, is it AED? What is the... GAD.
The GAD.
The Grand Renaissance Dam.
The currency.
Bir.
The
Ethiopian bir.
That would be different. But now it's in dollar. Dollar converted to Kenyan shilling gives you 520 billion. We haven't gotten here.
Yep.
No.
Okay.
That's where good governance starts. Transparency and being honest.
Yeah, indeed.
It's not there.
Well, before we go, I mean, Linus has to weigh in on this one. One of the things we cannot not talk about when we talk about governance and the state of the rule of law is, you know, human rights violations that we have witnessed over the last 2 years.
That's true, and this administration has really struggled on that front. Just the basic duty to respect the Constitution, to respect human rights. Abductions and killings that attended to the government's response to the Gen Z protests have left big scars on the country's landscape. Families are scarred. The people who have lost their relatives, the abductions and all that translated to a very poor record for the Ruto administration when it comes to human rights. And now we have the compensation panel that has not taken off yet. Will it take off? Of course, it's a matter of waiting for the courts, first of all, to decide on the legality of that panel. Before then, it comes back to Kenyans for another round of debates. You can see that the reactions have been varied from families and victims. Some have welcomed the initiative, and some are saying, no, how about justice for those who especially paid the ultimate price?
Indeed. So it is on that note that we leave it. We see it's this Saturday, that's the actual day, just a few days shy of that 3rd anniversary. So 3 years down, 2 to go. Let's see how it goes. Yeah. All right.
Yeah.
So Jamila?
Yeah, wacha tuanze na Thomas hapa. Anataka kugonga.
Wacha.